I have made quite a few videos in the past stating my support for abortion and reproductive rights, and here I am again talking about abortion. No matter how redundant it may be at this point, the story I'm going to talk about in this video is really fucking disgusting and is worth discussing. Anyway, from Reuters, Texas top court rules against woman who sought abortion for medical emergency. The Texas Supreme Court on Monday overturned a lower court's ruling that would have allowed a pregnant woman to get an emergency abortion under the medical exception for the state's near total abortion ban. The unanimous ruling from the Texas Supreme Court came hours after lawyers for the woman, Kate Cox, said in a court ruling that she had left the state to obtain an abortion, but nonetheless wanted to pursue the case. Cox has said her fetus had a fatal diagnosis and that her health was at risk if she continued the pregnancy to term, including her ability to have more children in the future. Trisomy 18 basically means instead of 2 copies of chromosome number 18, they have 3, and this negatively impacts the growth and development of the baby. Most fetuses who have this condition do not make it to term, or if they do manage to survive childbirth, they usually only have days to live. Kate has already had 2 C-sections, and if she were to continue her pregnancy, she would have to undergo a third one, which would not only jeopardize her health, but also future fertility, because she does want more children. Anyway, let's continue the article. The High Court, whose 9 judges are all Republicans, said in its unsigned opinion that a good faith belief by Domla Carson, a doctor who sought to perform the abortion and sued alongside Cox, that the procedure was medically necessary was not enough to qualify the state's exception. Instead, the court said that Carson would need to determine in her quote-unquote reasonable medical judgment that Cox had a life-threatening condition and that an abortion was necessary to prevent her death or impairment of a major bodily function. This enrages me to the core because it should not be up to judges who had no part in the creation of that child to decide what the person who is actually carrying the child inside their body can and can't do with it. And this is also my issue with calling those who want to force other people into birthing unwanted children pro-life, because these people are not pro-life in the fucking slightest. Because these judges in Texas's Supreme Court are fully aware that Kate's baby had no shot of living a happy and fruitful life. If it were carried to term, it would have almost certainly died shortly after birth. But it's like I've said before, people like these judges do not view women and people who can give birth in general as people who deserve reproductive rights, but rather baby-making machines. Because in their twisted worldview, the only duty of a woman is to bear a man's child. And even if the pregnancy poses a risk to the woman's health, well, too bad, you gotta fulfill that duty anyway. If you did not partake in the creation of that child, then I say you have zero right to say to the person who is actually carrying that child, no, you have to give birth to this child. You can't abort it. Because who the fuck are you? These judges, these lawmakers, have no relationship with these people whatsoever. They're not family, they're not friends, they're not anything of the sort. So why should they have the final say over whether or not someone can have the right to terminate a pregnancy that they have no involvement in? Stick to dealing with issues that actually affect the general public. In my opinion, government officials should not be meddling in deeply personal affairs such as this. Here's my stance. Anyone, regardless of any reason, especially if the pregnancy is a risk to their health, should be able to get an abortion. I've seen this stupid mindset floating around on the internet. Well, if a couple has unprotected sex and then they wind up with an unwanted pregnancy, they knew full well the ramifications of their actions, and therefore they should be forced to carry the pregnancy to term. Who the fuck wins in that situation? What if it's 2 dumb high schoolers in that situation? They have unprotected sex, even with knowing that it could potentially lead to pregnancy. The girl gets knocked up, shocker. And then what? They become parents before finishing high school, which is a severe roadblock in continuing their education, and is also a severe obstacle when it comes to getting more job opportunities. And they may come from low-income families, so therefore they may not get that much financial support from others, if at all. So their only option is to get a low-paying job where they're either barely able to scrape by, or can't scrape by, sustaining both themselves and a child, leading to a worse quality of life for not only themselves, but that child that they did not even want in the first place. So yes, you may may say they should have kept their legs closed in the first place, they knew exactly the ramifications of their actions, but that still does not mean that they have to become parents, especially if they're not ready to become parents. Having a child is a huge life-altering event that is not only a huge personal responsibility, but also a huge financial responsibility. Not everyone who has a uterus should be forced to pump out a child. It is their body, it is their choice, and the thoughts and beliefs of anyone who was not involved in creating that child, especially those who are not even involved in the life of that person carrying the child, is completely irrelevant. Spare me on the pro-life bullshit. Once that fetus leaves the womb, you can't give a fuck less about it. If that fetus grows up to become a person who gets pregnant, and that pregnancy poses a risk to their health or their life potentially, you can't give a fuck less. And that's why I hate referring to these people as pro-life, because they are not pro-life in the goddamn slightest. And yes, I know not every pro-lifer is necessarily anti-abortion. They may not like abortion, but they still view reproductive rights as a fundamental human right, and that everyone who is capable of giving birth should have access to an abortion should they choose to have one. Okay, yeah, cool. That's useless semantics bullshit, because I'm sure even your most vehement reproductive rights advocates don't necessarily like the procedure itself, because it's not a pleasant procedure at all. But anyway, I just wanted to address that real quick, because I've seen some people on the internet say this, and it's always annoyed me, because you know exactly the kinds of people we're talking about when we rail against pro-lifers. But anyway, another video on abortion. Who knows if this will be the last, because this country insists on being a totalitarian hellhole when it comes to reproductive rights. That's all I have to say. Bye-bye.